Puerto Rico occupies a unique and often ambiguous position within the American political landscape. As a U.S. territory, it is neither a fully sovereign nation nor a fully integrated state, existing in a legal and political limbo that has persisted for more than a century. For many Puerto Ricans, this status represents a paradox, a relationship that offers certain economic benefits but limits political representation and self-determination. Debates over Puerto Rico's future have raged for decades, centered on three primary options: statehood, independence, or the continuation of its current status as a U.S. commonwealth. Each option carries significant political, economic, and cultural implications, and each has its supporters and detractors. Some see Puerto Rico as akin to Greece, a nation struggling with debt and economic dependency, while others compare its potential to Switzerland, envisioning an independent and prosperous country with a strong economic foundation. This chapter explores the historical origins of Puerto Rico's territorial status, the key arguments for and against statehood and independence, and the broader implications of its political future. Territory in transition, a colonial legacy, the Spanish-American War, and the U.S. takeover. Puerto Rico's status as a U.S. territory dates back to 1898, when the United States defeated Spain in the Spanish-American War. Under the Treaty of Paris, Spain ceded control of Puerto Rico, along with the Philippines, Guam, and Cuba, to the United States. Unlike Cuba, which gained independence in 1902, Puerto Rico remained under American rule. The early years of U.S. governance saw Puerto Rico treated largely as a colonial possession. The Farragut Act of 1900 established a civilian government under American oversight, while the Jones Act of 1917 granted Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship, though without full constitutional rights. To this day, Puerto Ricans cannot vote in presidential elections unless they reside in one of the 50 states, and they have no voting representation in Congress. Commonwealth status and the political stalemate. In 1952, Puerto Rico adopted a new constitution and became a U.S. commonwealth, a status that granted it limited self-governance while maintaining its ties to the United States. This arrangement was intended as a compromise between full integration and independence, allowing Puerto Rico to manage its internal affairs while benefiting from U.S. economic and military protection. However, Commonwealth status has not resolved the fundamental tensions surrounding Puerto Rico's relationship with the United States. Over the years, several referendums have been held on the island's political status, but no clear consensus has emerged. Support for statehood independence and the continuation of Commonwealth status has fluctuated, with each side presenting compelling arguments. Comparisons to Greece, the economic crisis and dependency, the debt crisis and economic struggles. One of the most significant challenges facing Puerto Rico today is its economic situation. The island has faced a prolonged economic crisis, marked by high unemployment, declining population, and a massive public debt exceeding $70 billion. The crisis reached a breaking point in 2017 when Puerto Rico declared bankruptcy under the Puerto Rico Oversight Management and Economic Stability Act (PROMESA), a law passed by the U.S. Congress to address the island's financial collapse. Many observers have drawn comparisons between Puerto Rico and Greece, another entity struggling with debt, economic stagnation, and external financial control. Like Greece within the European Union, Puerto Rico lacks full sovereignty over its economic policies, making it difficult to implement independent solutions to its financial problems. The U.S. federal government retains significant authority over Puerto Rico's finances, including the ability to override local decisions through the federally appointed Financial Oversight and Management Board. Critics argue that Puerto Rico's economic struggles are exacerbated by its territorial status. Without the ability to control its own trade agreements, tax policies, or monetary system, the island remains economically dependent on the United States. Proponents of independence argue that Puerto Rico, like other nations that have gained independence, could restructure its economy and negotiate trade agreements to stimulate growth. Comparisons to Switzerland, a vision for economic sovereignty. The case for an independent Puerto Rico. While the Greek comparison highlights Puerto Rico's economic struggles, the Switzerland analogy presents an alternative vision. An independent, economically prosperous Puerto Rico with strong international trade relationships. Switzerland, a small nation with limited natural resources, has built a thriving economy based on financial services, trade, and diplomacy. Some proponents of Puerto Rican independence argue that the island could follow a similar path, leveraging its strategic location in the Caribbean to become a major financial and trade hub. Advocates for independence point to the success of other former colonies that have gained sovereignty and thrived. Countries such as Singapore, which was once a struggling British colony, have transformed into economic powerhouses through strategic investments and trade policies. A sovereign Puerto Rico could develop its own currency, set its own tax policies, and enter free trade agreements tailored to its economic needs. Challenges of independence. Despite the potential benefits of independence, there are significant challenges to consider. An independent Puerto Rico would lose the financial assistance and disaster relief provided by the United States. The island currently receives billions in federal funding for social programs, infrastructure, and emergency aid, support that would disappear if Puerto Rico became a sovereign nation. Moreover, independence could create uncertainty regarding citizenship and migration. While current Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, independence might require new agreements on citizenship rights, travel regulations, and labor mobility between Puerto Rico and the mainland U.S. The statehood debate: integration or assimilation? Arguments for statehood. Proponents of statehood argue that Puerto Rico's current territorial status is undemocratic, leaving its residents with limited political representation despite their contributions to the United States. Statehood would grant Puerto Ricans full voting rights, equal representation in Congress, and access to federal programs on the same level as the 50 states. Additionally, statehood could provide economic stability by fully integrating Puerto Rico into the U.S. economy. Proponents argue that statehood would eliminate uncertainty regarding federal funding and investment, allowing businesses to operate under a clear legal and financial framework. Opposition to statehood. Opponents of statehood, particularly those who favor cultural and linguistic preservation, argue that joining the Union would lead to the erosion of Puerto Rico's unique identity. Unlike any other U.S. state, Puerto Rico is predominantly Spanish-speaking, with a distinct cultural heritage that some fear would be diluted under statehood. Furthermore, some political factions believe that statehood would not necessarily resolve Puerto Rico's economic issues. Critics argue that federal tax laws and economic policies favoring the mainland would continue to disadvantage Puerto Rico, even if it became a state. The future of Puerto Rico, a fork in the road. Referendums and political uncertainty. Puerto Rico has held multiple referendums on its political status, but none have resulted in decisive action. The most recent vote in 2020 showed a narrow majority in favor of statehood, but turnout was low, and Congress has not acted on the results. Political divisions on the island and in Washington, D.C., have made it difficult to resolve the issue, leaving Puerto Rico in a state of perpetual limbo. Potential resolutions. As debates over Puerto Rico's future continue, several possible paths forward exist. Statehood. Congress could approve Puerto Rico's admission as the 51st state, granting full rights and responsibilities to its residents. Enhanced Commonwealth status. A revised version of Puerto Rico's Commonwealth arrangement could grant the island greater autonomy while maintaining its ties to the U.S. Independence. A sovereign Puerto Rico could establish its own government and economic policies, breaking free from U.S. oversight. Each option carries risks and benefits, and the ultimate decision will depend on the will of the Puerto Rican people and the political landscape in Washington. Conclusion. Puerto Rico's status remains one of the most complex and unresolved issues in American governance. Whether it becomes the Greece of the Caribbean, struggling under economic constraints, or the Switzerland, thriving as an independent nation, remains to be seen. What is clear, however, is that the current territorial arrangement leaves many Puerto Ricans without a voice in their own future. As discussions over statehood, independence, and autonomy continue, the ultimate fate of Puerto Rico will shape not just the island's future, but also the broader evolution of the American Republic.